Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle Devereaux, and I'm the CEO at the Guelph Community Health Center, one of the proud founding members of our local Adverse Childhood Experiences Coalition of Guelph and Wellington. I am really excited to be with you today as the moderator of today's session. Welcome to the Building Resilience Through Relationships learning opportunity with Dr. Jean Clinton, recognizing our Ontario Trillium Foundation seed grant, Building Community Resilience Project. We are at capacity today with over 500 registrants online with us. So many of you have joined from our own community. We have over 200 registrants from Guelph and Wellington County. Hello to you all and welcome. To those of you joining us from across the province, we have representation from Blind River, Sault Ste. Marie, Belleville, Timmins, Fort Frances, Little Current, Kingston, Ottawa, Sioux Lookout, New Liskeard, and Thunder Bay, just to name a few. Hello to you all and welcome. We are so grateful for your interest. And from across this country, hello to those of you signing on from British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland. Welcome. It is so great to have you with us. And to our neighbors from the South, the United States, welcome to you as well. And so why do we have so many of us gathered here today? To learn more about adverse childhood experiences and resilience? I will tell you why. Because the evidence is clear. This issue is incredibly important to the future health of our communities, our provinces, and our nations. We are here because we know that we can make incredible impacts if we work across our communities and our sectors to build protective factors and resilience for children, families, and the neighborhoods that we serve. Today, we have a great opportunity to learn together. Following our land acknowledgement, we will show our gratitude for the funding we have received from the Ontario Trillium Foundation to implement the Building Communities Resilience Project. We're also going to officially launch the ACEs and Resilience online training modules, which many of us on this webinar today have already registered, began, or completed. From our speakers today, you are going to hear and be inspired on how to apply the science of ACEs, toxic stress, and resilience to your work. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Jean Clinton, is going to share with us the science of resilience and the importance of relationships in promoting it. We're also going to hear from cross-sector service providers from Guelph and Wellington, who are going to share with you the incredible impacts that their understanding of ACEs and resilience has brought to their work with children and families. And we're also going to have an opportunity to hear from you throughout the session, where you're going to have an opportunity to ask your questions to our guests. I've got a few housekeeping details. When we reach the time for question and answers between speakers, you can ask these by pressing the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Given the number of participants that are online with us today, the questions that we do not have an opportunity to get to will be answered by our coalition by way of a written document that we commit to sharing with you in the new year. There's also a chat feature enabled, and through the chat, you can communicate with other participants across this country. Please note, we are not going to be monitoring the chat for questions, and just remind you to be respectful in your comments. The session is also being recorded today. And so follow up, you will receive an email with the webinar information, which you can view later, and also feel free to share broadly with your networks. And finally, your feedback is really important to us. And so we ask that you please complete the evaluation survey at the end of this webinar. Today, we're going to be speaking about protective factors for resilience, as well as childhood trauma and adversity. Some of these topics may be difficult for you to hear about. If you would like to speak to somebody about the issues raised, please connect with your family doctor or nurse practitioner or community supports available to you. If you live in Guelph, Wellington, or Waterloo, Here 24/7 is available for you to connect to. And if you live anywhere else in Canada and require support, you can contact Wellness Together Canada by texting Wellness 741-741. This encouragement to reach out for help is based in the evidence and also grounded in my own lived experience of multiple ACEs from my own childhood. And so I do want to take this moment to personally encourage you as a helper in this field of emotionally taxing work to proactively take care of yourself along the care pathway that feels right for you. We all have healing capabilities in our communities, but as wounded healers, we have the potential to struggle with vicarious trauma, to endure further suffering, and to burn out. To truly help others in our community, we each have a responsibility to lead by example, by taking care of ourselves, and by applying our own oxygen masks first. Please take good care of yourselves. First, I would like to begin today with a land acknowledgement. In doing so, I am keeping with Guelph Community Health Center's approach to land acknowledgements, where I'm going to reflect on this land. I will engage in a short exercise of learning and unlearning together with you, and then I will issue a call to action to each of us. As we gather here today, each of us are doing so on land that is subject to treaty tracts across this country. Those of us who are participating in this webinar from Guelph and Wellington County are on land that makes up Treaty 3, known as the Between the Lakes Purchases, signed in 1792 between the principal chiefs of the Mississauga Nation and John Graves Simcoe, a representative of the Crown. Treaty 3 covers territory between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and is approximately 3 million acres. Guelph and Wellington County is the territorial lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and our communities are home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. The image on your screen is one of the many bodies of water located within Treaty 3, being Guelph Lake. Today, as we learn about childhood adversity and trauma, we are called to reflect on the history of genocide and trauma that colonialism has given life to over the centuries. The direct and intergenerational trauma inflicted by the 60s scoop and the ensuing residential school system has left a path of intergenerational ACEs-based trauma on Indigenous communities across this country. However, we cannot just look at these injustices as though they are in our past. Systemic racism, oppression, and trauma to Indigenous children and families continues to be propagated in many ways, including through our current child welfare systems today. In 2016, the Ontario Human Rights Commission led an investigation into the overrepresentation of Indigenous and racialized children in the care of children's aid societies. This investigation found that Indigenous children were overrepresented in admissions to care in 93% of the agencies that were looked at, and many CASs showed extreme disproportionality. The proportion of Indigenous children admitted into care was 2.6 times higher than the proportion in the child population, and these figures are likely underestimated due to our limited collection of race-based data. While the causes for this overrepresentation are complex, poverty, one of the many intergenerational effects of colonialism, racism, and childhood adversity, was considered a primary driver in the report's findings. And so as we start today's session, let us not just consider the stolen land that we are on and the unjust ways that it came into our care and control. Let us also reflect on the continued threats that systemic racism and oppression pose to the Indigenous children and families across this country. As a call to action, I urge you to investigate the treaties that bind the land in your regions. And I also call on you to learn more about the self-determined, Indigenous-led work that is underway in your community to build resilience for Indigenous families and children, and to find out ways that you yourself can become an ally to support these efforts. If you have not had a chance to already do so, I encourage you to check out the ACES Coalition of Guelph and Wellington County by visiting our website. Here on the slide, you see the many partners that are working together across sectors in a symphony of collective impact with one another towards a resilient community that prevents and reduces the effects of ACEs in Guelph and Wellington County. The Building Resilience Community Project aims to build resilience and prevent and reduce adverse childhood experiences by sharing information and resources with parents and community members, and by providing targeted training to service providers. With the pandemic, efforts to raise awareness and inform service providers has shifted to online platforms. Enabled by our project funding, the ACES Coalition of Guelph and Wellington has developed evidence-based accessible ACEs and resilience training modules. Our initial aim was to train 400 service providers throughout our communities. But since early June, over 1,400 participants have registered and just over 400 have completed these courses. Participants are registered from across this country. The coalition has also developed and distributed resources for parents to support parenting in the pandemic, and has initiated a local community of practice for ACEs and resilience champions to learn and support one another in taking action to prevent and reduce the impact of ACEs. These efforts are especially important now in our communities and many others as we cope with the many secondary effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. With sincere thanks to Ontario Trillium Foundation, through the $75,000 that we have received, these achievements were made possible. We were also enabled by this grant to pivot from in-person to online training modules. And today's session with each of you is a testament to how important this shift was to enable accessible evidence-based training. At this time, I would like to pass it over to MPP Mike Schreiner. Welcome, Mike, to say a few words on behalf of our Guelph community.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I also want to thank you for your calls to action in your opening Indigenous land acknowledgement, and just say that, you know, as a settler on this land, I just want to reaffirm my commitment to the reconciliation process and my commitment to acting on your call to action. So thank you for that. I want to take a moment just to thank and congratulate Family and Children's Services, Guelph and Wellington County, for supporting the work of the ACES Coalition of Guelph and Wellington, and for being recognized by the Ontario Trillium Foundation with a $75,000 seed grant. This valuable seed grant will ensure the successful launch of the Building Community Resilience Project. And as Rochelle noted, there is so much research into addressing childhood trauma in a supportive and caring way in providing a foundation for lifelong health and well-being. And so I can tell you, I know how vital the work of the ACES Coalition is to our community here in Guelph and the broader community in Wellington County. And I have the utmost confidence that the ACES Coalition will continue to reduce childhood risk and protect the health and well-being of the next generation. And I just want to say, from a bottom of my heart, I want to say a thank you to all the member organizations who form the ACES Coalition here in Guelph and Wellington for just the vital and essential work you do to making Guelph a caring and inclusive community. And so I'm so excited about this grant and the resiliency project. And I also want to take a moment to just thank the Ontario Trillium Foundation for this particular grant and all the grants that the OTF provides to support good work in our community. And I know Joe Atherton from OTF is going to be saying a few words. But Joe, I want to thank you personally and all the volunteers who are part of the Ontario Trillium Foundation process. You all do really vital work, and I know you do it as volunteers, and everyone in our community and people across the province really thank you for the work that you do. So Rochelle, I will turn it back to you to carry on. And thank you everyone for being here today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm now going to pass it over to Joe Atherton, who, as Mike shared, is a volunteer with the Trillium Foundation Review Committee and played a vital role in our community receiving the funds today.
Thank you, Rochelle. Hello, everyone. Let me start by saying that I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy during these very challenging times. My name is Joe Atherton, and I'm humbled to be able to attend your vital virtual event with Mike Schreiner. As a volunteer with the Ontario Trillium Foundation from Waterloo-Wellington and Dufferin Grant Review Team, I'm glad to be here to learn about the differences your grant has made in the community. Even though today's meeting is online, as Rochelle has said earlier, we're gathered on traditional territory of Indigenous people, and Ontario Trillium Foundation acknowledges the long history of the First Nations and Métis peoples in Ontario. OTF, Ontario Trillium Foundation, is an agency of the Government of Ontario and one of Canada's leading grant-making foundations. And thanks to all the funding we receive from the Ontario government, we are able to award nearly 650 grants a year to nonprofit organizations like yours. In 2019, the Family and Children's Services of Guelph, Wellington County received $75,000 seed grant funding from the Ontario Trillium Foundation to support the work of Adverse Childhood Experiences Coalition to deliver a project at the idea stage to develop, test, improve, and disseminate materials on adverse childhood experiences for parents and caregivers. The aim was to support the positive development of children and youth and help parents, caregivers, and adult allies who have the skills to support children and youth who are facing barriers. Today, you are showing us the results of your hard work and how you continue to empower communities to serve you through education. Thank you for coming to OTF with your idea. I look forward to sharing your story with my fellow OTF volunteers. And finally, thank you for the work that you are doing every day to make our community a healthier and more vibrant place for everyone, and for supporting our promising young people. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot, Joe. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Jean Clinton. Dr. Clinton is a clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster, the Division of Child Psychiatry. She is on staff at McMaster Children's Hospital with cross appointments in pediatrics and family medicine, and is an associate of the Department of Child Psychiatry at Sick Children's Hospital. She is a fellow of the Child Trauma Academy, as well as a 0 to 3 Academy Fellow since 2013. She has been a consultant on children and youth mental health programs, child welfare, and primary care for over 30 years. Dr. Clinton was appointed as an education advisor to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Education from 2014 to 2018. Dr. Clinton is renowned and nationally and internationally as an advocate for children's issues. Her special interest lies in brain development and the crucial role that relationships and connectedness play. Jean champions the development of national, comprehensive child well-being strategies, including a system of early learning and care for all young children and their families. She is equally committed to ensuring that children and youth have voices that are heard and respected. Dr. Jean Clinton is also authored her first book, Love Builds Brains, which can be ordered online through Tall Pines Press on Amazon and in bookstores everywhere. It is really special for us to have Dr. Jean Clinton here with us, as she joined our community at our initial call to action here in Guelph, Wellington in June 2017. At that time, Dr. Clinton shared information about the relationship between ACEs and poor health and explained the adaptations the brain makes to stressful stimuli. At that time, when she spoke to our community, she inspired hope and the work of the ACEs Coalition when she reminded us that ACEs are not our destiny. We can change our biology, she told us. Our biology is not our destiny. Today, Dr. Clinton will share the latest evidence on the importance of relationship in building resilience. In terms of logistics, just a reminder, after Dr. Clinton's presentation, we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions, which again, I remind you to put in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. Over to you, Dr. Clinton.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Rochelle, and it's so impactful for me to hear from you that gathering so many years ago, well, only a couple of years ago, had such a profound impact. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that as we're really digging deep into what happens in childhood, the long reach that it has, communities are more and more realizing that we must do something about it. And so it's a real pleasure for me to be here today to share with you a little bit of a review, not much, but really, I want to really highlight the phenomenal resource. I can't believe it's only $75,000 that you have created as a community. And I look forward so much to hearing the stories that will follow this presentation. So the heart of the matter is that we can build resilience even in the face of intense adversity through relationships. And what we're learning, and the wonderful scientists like Michael Unger are telling us, that it's not about your own personal resilience, that you just look after yourself. But the truth is that really actually takes a village, not only to raise the child, but to raise the parent and to raise the community up so that everyone in the community thrives. I need to let you know a couple of things about myself and why what you're doing in terms of the ACEs Coalition and building resilience through relationships is so very important. So I've been a child psychiatrist for over 30 years and spent so much time in the middle of a rushing river of kids and families with mental health issues. And I could never be enough or do enough to catch them all. And one of my dear mentors, the late Dr. Paul Steinauer, said, Jean, we need to spend time being upstream, seeing why are children falling into the stream, into the river of dismay, of despair, of disease. What can we do to prevent them from falling in the first place? So I invite you to join me in my journey as an upstreamist, because in terms of what you're doing as a community, you really are looking at what are the social conditions that children live and work and age in that are affecting their biology, because that's what we know to be true, that our genes are not our destiny. Our genes are listening to the environment and get turned on or silenced by experience. As you, as communities across this country, come together to say, how can we make our place, our world, our community the best place to raise a child, to support families, and to age well in, then you're being upstreamists. But you know, I also think that we need to think about what is our North Star belief as we enter into a coalition or any collective efficacy work. And one of the things that comes to my mind all of the time is the First Nations teaching that children are our sacred ones, that it is a sacred responsibility of the community to raise the children. And also that children are those, the word for child, I learned all of this from Tom Porter, a Mohawk elder. The word for child is he who has the light within. So how about we think for the next period of time that we spend together here, how can I, in my work, create that opportunity for that light to shine? Now, the other thing you need to know about me, and many of you do, is that I'm a brain geek. I love the brain. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain, but one of the things I learned from a colleague, Dr. Tokohama Espinosa, is that if we get started right off the bat, having you engage in a brain activity, it gets the old neurons, the brain cells firing in a way that's going to help your attention and help your memory. Because what we know is attention plus memory equals learning. So as you're learning new things today, as you're paying attention, your brains are actually being changed. So here's a task for you. I want you to think of through this time, what have you learned that is 3 things that are new to you, that are unknown, you didn't know before. 2 things that are so interesting, you're going to continue to research them and share with somebody else. And 1 thing that you're going to change about your practice based on the information that you got today. So where do I want to start? So you heard I'm a brain geek, but what I've been so influenced by is the fact that our brain is built over time, that our brain is not a fixed entity when babies are born, but you know, the baby's brain weighs about 1 pound. By the time they're 2.5, 3, it's 3 pounds. And the brain cells are all in place, but it's the experiences that are literally turning the neurons, the brain cells on to connect with each other in different parts of the brain. So if a little one is read to, if a young person, an adolescent is busy learning how to play the guitar or drums or basketball, their brain is being built by that experience. And so we're very worried when it's negative experiences like the adverse childhood experiences. But what we're learning is that if you have buffering of this environment, of the experience by relationship, you change the outcome. So the brain architecture is built by experience. How it gets built is by serve and return, by the back and forth of everyday experience. 1 little video clip I very frequently show is of my 2-week-old grandson, and his dad sticks his tongue out at him. And he sticks his tongue back out at him. He's only 2 weeks old. He doesn't even know that he has a face. Why is this so important? Well, what we've learned is that we as a human species need each other desperately. So you don't build the brains with fancy flashcards or iPads and tablets, those things. You build it by the human interaction, the serve and return. And you know, what we're learning is that this is true not only in infancy to build the architecture of the brain, but also in the building of resilience, in the looking to support people as we repair. The concept of relational health, relational support can actually repair some of the lack of connectivity that happens in the early years. Oh, there's a little, oh, it's working here. Watch this, this is gorgeous. There he is, absolutely destined for brilliance. He is. So what is this about? Why am I focusing on this? Because we know so much now about the need for the brain, the need for, I say the brain, but the need for, through the brain, the biology of our immune system, of our cardiac system, of our lung system, that the brain is a social organ and that we need connectivity. We need to reach out and be associated with other people. So as Bruce Perry, a fabulous researcher, talks about, is the brain is a social organ wired to connect, and the brain's primary matrix is social relationships. So here's the challenge. Relationships absolutely matter. When you have a strong sense of connection to another person, then your stress system, the release of adrenaline and cortisol, which affect your learning and your attention if it's too much, when you're connected to somebody, then you have a release of oxytocin and other neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, pleasure, etc. And those relational firings neutralize the stress hormones. So it makes a huge difference. But what are we learning? And we learned a lot about this from the writing of Robert Putnam many years ago in Bowling Alone. But what we know is that the relational landscape is very much changing. And Bruce Perry talks about this in his Child Trauma Academy, that children have fewer emotional, social, and cognitive interactions with fewer people. So here we need people to build brains. When we've got the brain system set up, and I'll talk about stress, when we've got that set up, we're healthier. And yet we're creating a society where we don't have the opportunities for kids to get together. And many of us in my field, in child psychiatry and mental health, are very, very worried about the impact of COVID-19 and the social isolation that we're seeing for so many kids. Why is that? Because this is the heart, to me, of the work that you're doing. Because societies, communities that recognize that when you want to make an impact on the development of our most vulnerable, you really need to take an ecological model. That is, you need to look at the whole number of spheres that children and families interact with and intersect with. So this is the work of Dr. Clyde Hertzman. And Clyde did this in 2008 with a group of people from across the world to see what is it that we need for children to thrive. And so what he talks about is we need to be thinking about what is necessary at the individual child level. What are the characteristics of the child? How do they interact with their world in their most intimate connection, which is the family? But you know, we have spent many years, and we could go into some of the therapies that were used in the past, where people focus just on the child and never included the family. But you know, you can't have anything to do with a baby, for example, without the adult. There is no such thing as just a baby. What Winnicott said. What does that mean? It means that as a community, you need to be asking, how can we support the family? How can we support the family so that they are having the supports they need in order to meet the needs of that child? Because their stress can be contagious and affect the stress of the child. And so when you ask about the family, they say, well, what about at the residential area? Are we as a coalition making sure that there are places for kids to play? Are we making sure that we've got adequate childcare, high quality, accessible childcare? At the region, what are the decisions that are being made to affect that? And as you know, there's been some decisions made recently in neighboring communities that have challenged some of this, what we know. At the national level, we wonder about what are the emphases, you know what I mean, on looking after the needs of children. So the global environment also makes a huge difference. And you know how many of our young people, they're going to be the ones who deal and help us through this climate, this whole issue there. But you know, within that, there are non-geographic, if you will, really important communities. And one of them is the relational community. And I'm sure what we're going to hear in the stories later on in today's presentation, is that relational community has been really important for many families, to have a sense of belonging, to have a sense of these people here know me. I am one of them. It may be a cultural relationship. It may be a geographic neighborhood relationship. And then we also have early childhood services and programs which make a difference on the child. So here we need to think then, all right, so the brain is built by experience, but you're telling me that adverse childhood experiences, so bad things in the environment can affect the brain. How can we buffer the brain then from these adverse childhood experiences? And you know, two things. One, that the brain has absolutely the ability to take in all the good that we can give for children. All of the good the brain can take in, and it gets changed by that. But there isn't a child or a baby that says, oh, this is a bad experience, I don't want it, and pushes it away. What we now know is that toxic stress, so stress that is unremitting, that is experienced by the child, like maltreatment, like significant mental illness in the parent or within the family, they affect the development. And if it's not buffered by relationships, then what we see is those children in their early life have biology that gets altered so that later on they have disease. So it's not enough though anymore to talk about what's wrong with you. What is now being asked is what has happened to you. And that is at the heart of resilience. At the heart of resilience, I'll say, is relationships, is an understanding of the conditions, the situations that people are in, and the community rallying around. But here's some science into relationships. And I'm sharing with you two resources that have been very useful to me. One of them, Anne Maston, has been one of the major researchers in the US, looking at resilience, what it's about, and then our own Michael Unger from Nova Scotia. Now, back in the days, people didn't even think about resilience. They were thinking about, how do you label psychopathology? How is it that some people get depressed? Why do some have anxiety? Why do some have schizophrenia? And then some scientists, Garmeski for one of them, said, why is it that not everybody who is exposed to these adverse things, you know, within the same family, something bad happens and some kids just manage it, but other kids get severely depressed. Why is it? Why is there a difference in the response to adversity? And that's how the science of resiliency was born. So when it first came out, they were talking about it. They talked about, well, you know what? It's a gene. Some people are just born genetically superior when it comes to resilience. And the people who had fought really hard to get their way up that mountain of distress and struggle said, what do you mean? We work very, very hard here. This is not a gene. This is effort. This is calling on community and resources to help pull you through. So what is resilience? Let me give you the scientific definition by Michael Unger first. And essentially, so Jean's take on this is resilience is all about when something bad happens. So you need something bad to have to even talk about resilience. So when something bad happens, you've got what it takes to get through and do okay. So how Michael describes that is in the context of exposure to significant adversity, and this is from his research across the world. Resilience is the capacity of the individual to navigate, to get your way to the supports, the resources that you need. So for example, I've had, my brother, my older brother died, a very, very difficult death. And so I had to navigate my way to deal with that to the resources, my other siblings, my husband, my children. I had to navigate my way to that resource and then I needed to be able to use them well. So navigate your way to psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources that sustain well-being and their capacity individually and collectively to negotiate for these resources to be provided and experienced. So, we'll hear stories about communities thinking about really great ideas to support families with young children, having food banks and support groups, and the doors are open, but nobody's coming in. So that is what's lacking there is the resources are there, but people have not learned how to negotiate for the resources. And what we'll hear today is how communities of resilience think about, well, how can we recognize the resource need and make the connection for others? So when we're thinking about the Guelph-Wellington community, I was really impressed with the work that has been done. One, that they have data to start with. They did the ACEs questionnaire, which was developed by an internist and an epidemiologist with 17,000 different people in a well-to-do middle-class area of San Diego. And they asked these 17,000 people what they had experienced in childhood. They had 10 questions. They asked them about abuse, about neglect, and about household dysfunction. And what they were able to do, unlike any other places, was they were able to connect those, the filling out of that questionnaire with the people's actual health, because they were part of this big insurance, this big HMO. And so what you in Guelph, or what the people in Guelph and Wellington have done, is actually surveyed the community and asked, how many times, in your life, did you ever experience this? And what you as a community have discovered is, in fact, 80% of participants have experienced one ACE. You know what the highest ACE is? Being emotionally abused. That's such a parenting issue. It's such an issue of relationship. So 30% report experiencing 4 or more ACEs. Now, what's telling here is that this is higher than most other reviews that have been done, because in the original study, it was about 66% had one, and only about 12 to 16% had more than 4 ACEs. So there's something going on in your area, which means you have done a fabulous job of bringing this coalition together to say, how can we look to help our families and our community be more resilient? Because, you can sit and say, oh, wow, I had 4 I have 4 adverse childhood experiences, and the research would say that I'm much more likely to have heart disease or lung disease or not do well in school. So I give up. What's the point? Or you can say, well, you know what? This may be what happened to me when I was young, but I can be the master of my destiny. I can know that I am at higher risk for some of these health outcomes, and I can make a big difference in it. But I could also say, if my ACE score is 5, I'm going to make sure my kids only stay to 1. And so this is taking a resilient mindset. And so the community has also looked to see what are the resilience, how do people see their own resilience in your community? And what you see here is that a third of them report having low resilience. And very commonly, the people who have low resilience are the people who have more burden on their back, less education, more challenges. But look at this next slide. This next slide, and I'll tell you as I understand it, is each bar here is 1 ACE, 2 ACE, 3 ACE, 4 ACE. But each bar says in the protective, if you are more resilient, do you have better outcomes? And what you see is the little lighter bars in between that shows the more resilient you are, the less impact of adverse childhood experiences. It literally pushes down. So now let me do a big advertisement for this phenomenal resource that has been produced with this seed money, and kudos to Ontario Trillium Foundation. So I've actually taken screenshots of a bunch of it. And what I love about it is, so I've given you the scientific definition and you're kind of shaking your head and you're going, oh, well, okay, that's good. Oh, okay, but I get it when you say it's getting through tough times, getting to the things that you need. So what this free resource, and take a screenshot here, is available. It is a fabulous, very accessible, very scientifically sound resource. And what they talk about in the modules is what is resilience. And so the other definition, another definition, is the capacity of a dynamic changing system to adapt successfully to disturbance that threatens system function, viability, or development. Also known as resilience is the ability to adapt or bounce back from difficult times. So here are some key points that are made. It's not something that someone has or doesn't have. Sometimes you do have it. You're resilient when your father dies, but you fall apart when your brother dies. Resilience is built up over time. It's not static. There's not one way to show resilience. We can show it in many different ways and many individuals, and it can be exhibited through skills, attributes, or abilities, and anyone can become resilient at any stage in life. But of course, like everything else, it's easiest to build when you're in childhood, when the brain is forming. So here is what was included in terms of what were they asking about when they asking about resilience. And this was the brief resilience scale. So it's talking about, I bounce back quickly after hard times. I have hard times making it through stressful events. It does not take me long to recover from a stressful event. It's hard for me to snap back when something bad happens. I usually come through difficult times with little trouble. I tend to take a long time to get over setbacks in my life. So these are, as you can see, are scored differently from negative to positive, and you come up with a resilience score. So we can look at ourselves and say, how resilient are we? But we can also look to see, well, what is it that I need to do to be more resilient? And I think this is so important. And the things like learning to be the boss of your emotion. And I love the work of Mark Brackett in this area, who's written a book called Permission to Feel. And what we know that regulation of your emotion absolutely gives you the chance, the opportunity to pause between a stimulus and a reaction. There is a pause. And when you understand your emotions, when you learn to experience them, to express them, and to manage them, which is the task of regulation, then you are able to not be overwhelmed in this to the same degree. And of course, how do you build regulation of your emotion? It's through relationship and co-regulation. So resilience looks like all of these things: controlling impulse, being able to identify what's going wrong, what is causing adversity, having self-efficacy, having a sense that you're able to overcome a barrier, and other such things. I won't show this little video, but if you Google, if you Google Brain's Journey to Resilience, a fabulous resource from the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative. And so here is the 4 core things that we know about childhood and the main protective factors. So supportive adult-child relationships, number 1. Supportive adult-child relationships. So how can you as communities make sure that every single child has an adult whose eyes light up for them? You know, we'll hear about schools who are exquisitely focusing on children having a caring adult that they perceive as caring. You know, when we do surveys, adults in schools say, yes, we care lots about kids. And then you ask the kids and it's far different percentage. The adults think way more, kids feel they're cared for, and the kids say way less. So supportive adult-child relationships, what does that mean as well? It means that you think you connect with the usual suspects, but think about connecting with the unusual suspects. So recreation, library, police, everyone needs to see that all kids are our kids. And I can build relationships, I can reach out, and I can make kids feel safe by building relationships and connection. That biologically neutralizes the impact of that high stress. So the next is a sense of self-efficacy and perceived control. I can make a difference in my world. Working with in community settings, having student voice, having student agency is so important, with giving them a sense of purpose and meaning. So it's always very, very good to have the ability to adapt to new situations, but also to have self-regulation. And we are in the process our entire life of developing our self-regulatory abilities. Just look at COVID-19 and toilet paper to recognize that the adult world, we're not done being self-regulated yet. Another big issue is having a source of faith, of having a source of hope, and of having cultural traditions. You know, there was a big study done a number of years ago. Well, actually, it wasn't big. It was an intense, long-term, lots of information study. And they looked at children who were in psychiatric hospitals, young people in psychiatric hospitals, and they interviewed them after they'd been out. And unfortunately, many of them were not doing very well. But when they looked at the ones who had done well, what was so huge for them was this sense of hope, this sense of, I can make a difference in my life. It's so huge to think about finding hope wherever that may be. So, you know, there are those who are absolutely actively, like you are, diving in and saying, what we've got adverse childhood experiences like physical, verbal, sexual, physical, emotional neglect. There we've got the ACEs there. But what are some counter ACEs? So liking school, what does that require? It requires schools seeing themselves as a place not just of content delivery, but seeing schools as a place where a priority is belonging. People talk to me about Maslow before Bloom in terms of thinking about education. So liking school means, what is the culture of the school? How are the children feeling that they are included, involved, and valued? They need teachers who care. They need opportunities to have fun. We have to remind so many people these days that children learn best through play. A predictable home routine. The brain does not like uncertainty. And so the more that the home can be made to be predictable, routines, the better. Having a caregiver whom you feel safe with, beliefs that provide comfort, and having good friends and neighbors. All of these make the counter ACEs. So the Alberta Family Wellness have done a really, and this again is from the modules. The Alberta Family Wellness, that video talks about how we've got a scale like a seesaw that tells that helps us think about where are positive experiences, how are they affecting a child, but what about negative experiences? How are they affecting a child? And what we see in this example here, it's that when positive experiences outweigh, the scale tips more towards positive outcomes. Now, I said that there is no such thing as a resilience gene, but genes absolutely do make a difference. They do make a difference. There are biological resistance. Some have biological resistance and is influenced by the genes. In the presence of positive experiences, those kids are more likely to do well. In the presence of negative experiences, those children will have difficulties. The children that we worry most about are the children who have genetic vulnerabilities and are in negative situations. So there are gene environment interactions for sure. But do you know what? We have no clue how to identify which kids have a short part of their DNA or a long part of their DNA, which is the epigenetics, which is what the scientists look like. So we need to be saying we need to create the conditions for all children to thrive, no matter what their background. So what do we know? Again, nurturing and supportive relationships with at least one adult is the most important protective factor. So educators out there, think about who are the kids who are most looking like they're not connected, that they don't have a sense of belonging, and reach in to them. There's a fabulous organization in the US called the Search Institute, and they've done research on millions of young people. And what they talk about is how when you have internal resources and external resources, the more of them that you have, and they identify 40 of them, then the more you are proactive and doing well and less likely to get into trouble. The next stage of their work, though, has looked at developmental relationship framework. And so it says, or how I read it anyway, is, we say, let's have supportive relationships. What does that actually mean? Well, it means that you show that you care, absolutely. But it also means you show you've got expectations, you share power. So look up the Search Institute Developmental Relational Framework, because when young people have these developmental relationships in their life, it shows, the science shows they do better. They build resilience. They're able to do well in the face of adversity. So this is buffering of the adversity. They also, what's really important is that not just focusing on I'm going to be nice to you, I'm going to build up the relationship with you, but so many of the kids that I see as a child psychiatrist are lacking certain skills of self-regulation, for an example. And so realizing that every behavior has a reason and all kids would do well if they can, makes you stop and think about, well, what is going on with this behavior? Why this child right now? And you start to see, well, maybe they don't have the skill yet. That's 3 magic letters, yet, of being able to regulate their emotion or regulate their behavior, regulate their thoughts. So what's really important, as we heard in the opening, is that adults have to check in with themselves first, have to see about putting on their own mask first. And I love this part that it says it's never too late to build resilience. So is there data? Is this just Jean who's so passionate about relationships, or is there information? And so there is very good accumulating evidence quoted in this in these modules about the fact that when they ask adults about their experiences with adverse childhood experiences, and then also ask them about the positive childhood experiences, what they saw was those positive childhood experiences diminished the impact of the adverse ones. So the positive child experiences, by the data, neutralized, brought down some of the adverse childhood experiences. What was that through? Diminishing the stress response, yes, but also through the promoting of resilience. So you out there as service providers, again, this is from the modules, you can promote resilience by strengthening protective factors, helping young people and families build the skills of communication, of collaboration, of creativity and critical thinking. You can, with families, share information and resources to increase knowledge and to increase understanding. You can facilitate access to programs and services. When I was in New Orleans, or Baton Rouge, after Hurricane Katrina, I was speaking with a psychologist, and she said, you know, the kids aren't coming from so many of the people from New Orleans had moved to Baton Rouge because of the floods, and they lived in these trailers, and many of them didn't bring their kids to school. And this psychologist decided, I'm going to go out and talk to them, the families, because she really believed that they cared about their kids. And so she went out, she said, you know, we've got all these great programs to be excited for the kids, and you know, we can do some cultural activities, and but how do we get you to come here? And they said, we're never coming inside your doors. You have your skinny arse chairs there, we're not welcome there. So here were the programs. Remember that definition about navigating to the resources and be able to negotiate for using them. In that situation, they were not able, well, they weren't until that psychologist went out and worked with the families to see how can we do this. So multiple protective factors work to build resilience. It takes the village. And there are fabulous examples in the program that talk about things like self-efficacy, having a strong cultural identity, having self-regulation and temperament and the individual. But what can help is having family and relational protective factors here are things like adequate housing and income, stable supportive relationships, stimulating home environment. It's a fabulous resource. And you and your organization or wherever you sit in this can think about, well, what can I do? What can we do to be protective? When you look at the community, you protective factors, you can think about safe and connected communities, access to services, involvement in the neighborhood, all of these kind of things, being happy at school, having high quality childcare, so many things that can make a difference. I want to shift focus just for a few minutes here to simplify, if I could, to simplify when we think about the brain and its need for, so the brain needs to feel safe. It has all kinds of mechanisms in the amygdala and the hippocampus to be looking out for danger. When kids and adults experience environments where that brain is firing all the time about be on guard, watch out, then the emotional part of the brain, that be on guard part of the brain, is the one that's in charge. It's the boss. So the more senior part, the smarter part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't get any action when you've got that firing of the emotional brain. So my friend and colleague, Stephen de Groot, has been thinking a lot about what can we do to create the conditions for resilience? What can we do to create the conditions for thriving? And what he talks about are the 3 great states. And we can affect these 3 great states in relationship and in the environment. So what are they? So one primary driver is to be safe. Remember, we've got that brain there looking at the environment all around. Is it safe? Am I not? So we need to create resilient community, to create resilient families, and to create resilience in the child by ensuring that they feel safe. That includes all of the aspects of safety: physically, emotionally, socially, mentally safe. Now, the second great state that Stephen talks about is being significant. And that is, and we see this so deeply in education, involved in education, that kids who have had adversity and come to school and they feel valued, they feel worthy, they feel a sense of belonging and connection, we see that they have better academic and human development outcomes. How do we know this? Well, for one thing, you look at school climate surveys by socioeconomic location, and you see that when there is positive school climate, the kids who feel that they have that sense of belonging, even though they may come from distressed neighborhoods, they do better. The last S, the last great state, is situated. And that is when all of us have direction, have clear expectation, clear roles. We've got a focus on what is the why and the what. We have purpose and goals. Then we can make a huge difference. And what I love about the ACES Coalition and the work that you're doing all together is how you are focusing on these 3 great states, which are so very important. So, just in closing, I want to talk about what can I do? What can you do? What can we do to be more resilient in the face of adversity, particularly given COVID-19? How are we going to deal with the changes that are coming up? What are we going to do about Christmas and the family? So this is the research of Dr. Lucy Hone, a New Zealand researcher, who studied in America about resilience and then went back to New Zealand, to Christchurch, to help her community there after the earthquake. But she herself experienced dreadful death of her child and best friend. And so she examined resilience from the other side. So what she talks about, the characteristics of resilient people, are 3 things. 1, when life is hard, people who are resilient say, life sucks, man. They don't waste a single neuron, a single energy saying, why me? Why does life have to be so hard? Why does it have to be like this? They get up and they get going. You know, my friend Kathy Lee Porter from The Blend told me the story about her grandmother used to say, you know, if you land in a pile of dung, are you going to lie in it? Or are you going to get up and wash yourself off? That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is thinking, what am I thinking about all the time? What she has found is that people who are thinking toxic thoughts all the time are making them sick. So they choose, what am I going to think about? And then they choose, what am I going to focus on? What you focus on, your attention, it grows. What are you watering? We also know we so need laughter. We also know we so need gratitude. Gratitude changes the brain. If there's one thing you can do today, it's stop and say, I'm going to count 3 things that I'm grateful for. One of the things that I'm grateful for in finishing is hearing the story recently of a man visiting a village in Africa. And he said to the kids, okay, I've got lots of candy here. I'm going to put the candy over there by the tree, and whoever gets there first gets it, gets the most. And so what the kids then did was they all joined hands together and they ran together and they shared the candy. And this is the story, the philosophy of Ubuntu. How can any of us be happy if all the others were safe? It's an African tribe that says, I am what I am because of who we all are. That truly is the story of building resilience through relationships and the fabulous work that you're doing. So well done. And I hope to be involved with you and learn more as you learn. Thank you. Back over to you, Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Jean. That's the second time that I have heard the Ubuntu quote this week, and it's so powerful. I am who I am because of who we are. What a beautiful description of collective impact and our work together. Because of our time today, we are just going to answer one question now, and we may have more time at the end for more questions. And as we committed to getting the written questions to you in the new year. But Jean, we have one question here that says, in your opinion, does knowing one's ACEs score matter? And if so, how?
Yes, I think that it does matter because knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. When we are aware that we have had experiences in our life that may be influencing us, that we may have been unaware of before, then we're in the pilot seat, then we're in the control seat. So absolutely, I think that it is important that we do examine that. But it's important to examine it in the context of particularly if it's a health or a psychological thing, in the context of a relationship with a primary care practitioner or someone who can be with you as you explore.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clinton, and thank you in the chat. I see many people saying fabulous presentation. Thanks for sharing your expertise and sincere thank you. So on behalf of the Guelph-Wellington ACEs Coalition, we were pleased to see you in 2017 to kick off this great work, and we're so grateful to have you with us today to celebrate some of the many strides we've made. So thank you, and thank you for your contributions to this practice.
My pleasure, Rochelle. Thank you.
Thank you. So right now we're going to turn our attention to some local experts. We have 4 presenters with us here today to share their stories of how they're building resilience on a community level. I'm going to introduce them all together now to enable a smooth transition between the speakers. So today we're going to hear from Dr. Melanie Bloom. Dr. Bloom's a family physician here at the Guelph Community Health Center. After a decade of practice, Dr. Bloom was discouraged that she wasn't seeing more positive outcomes for some of her patients who were struggling with long-term mental health and addiction issues, despite access to medical and psychotherapy treatments. Even more concerning, she was starting to see these issues passed down to the next generations. And her patients were stuck in this cycle of trauma, parenting, and attachment struggles, as well as intergenerational poverty. With her knowledge of ACEs and resilience, Dr. Bloom has begun shifting her conversations with her parents away from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, and has started thinking outside of the traditional medical model in her approach. Today, Dr. Bloom practices trauma-informed care, and when it makes sense to do so, she engages her patients in questions about their childhood experiences, and then uses this information to guide conversations about their health issues and those of their children. Next, we're going to hear from Mike Anderson. Mike Anderson is the principal of the Upper Grand District School Board Elementary Remote School, home of the Grand River Otters. He is also the former principal at Brant Avenue Public School in Guelph. Mike understands that many of the students that he teaches and their families experience ACEs and other forms of adversity. With an understanding of ACEs and the power of resilience, Mike partnered with the ACEs Coalition and the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition to implement a mentally healthy schools pilot at the Brant Avenue School. Together with his team, they implemented really tangible things to support safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments that are the foundation of a mentally healthy school. Mike and his team, whether they're in a brick and mortar school or a remote school, prioritize physical and emotional safety for their students. They focus on teaching students rather than subjects and regularly remind students of their value and potential. Katie Davis is a parent outreach worker employed with the Guelph Community Health Center, working in the Brant neighborhood group. She started with this pilot program in 2012. Katie graduated from the Social Services Worker Program at Conestoga College with honors in 2003. Previous to her role with the health center, Katie spent 8 years in a similar position at the House of Friendship as a community outreach worker, providing direct support to families and their children. Katie's primary role in the neighborhood is providing families and their children with resources, both formal and informal, in their own neighborhood, to increase the whole family's well-being, basic needs, and overall livelihood. A huge part of Katie's work relies on partnerships with agencies across the city and community. A key part of partnership that amplifies the success of the work is the one with Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition and the neighborhood support worker within her neighborhood group, who works together with her to connect families to access support through the neighborhood. Katie is going to talk about the work being done in the neighborhood level with families to build resiliency and capacity with parents and children. And finally, we're going to hear from Nikki Hammond. Nikki is the neighborhood support worker stationed at the Brant Avenue neighborhood. Through working, volunteering, and living in Brant community for over 9 years, Nikki has been able to grow strong, healthy relationships with local schools, churches, businesses, and community members, and has positioned herself as a community leader. Working hand in hand with the parent outreach worker, Katie Davis, Nikki supports community members to navigate and access social support systems, food security programs, and to connect partners and agencies that will contribute to the growth and development of a vibrant Brant community neighborhood. So we're so pleased to have this expertise here with us today, and I'm going to pass it over to our panelists to share with you some of their stories.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melanie Bloom. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope to be able to share with you a few of the ways that the ACEs movement has really shaped my work and what I've learned along the way, and hopefully encourage you to consider supporting these vulnerable but resilient families in a different way. Many of the families I work with have very high ACE scores, and through 17 years of practice, I've seen its impact carry through the generations. The longer I do this work, I'm more and more convinced that at the heart of the best preventions and interventions is understanding your client's story through an ACEs lens and focusing on relationship building. I truly, truly feel that the most crucial piece, as Dr. Clinton spoke to, is about relationship. And I think as service providers, we have a responsibility to support ongoing relationships as well. Our current health and social support systems are not set up to easily facilitate this. I visualize our system like a hotel hallway with a bunch of closed doors, where your home and your personal life are the hallway. And the closed doors are the services that you need or that someone's told you need to access. Maybe school is behind one door, primary care is behind another, mental health support's behind another, maybe F&CS behind another. It takes a lot of courage to open one of those doors to the unknown that's behind it, where someone is likely to ask you to be vulnerable and to share your struggles. And after your scheduled 30-minute appointment where you've bared your soul, you're back at the door into your hallway, open and raw, to do the homework you've been given until your next appointment in 4 weeks. Does this sound familiar? This is kind of how our system has been set up. And many of us are okay to navigate this. When we're back out in our own little hallway, it's hopefully calm and stable, and our friends and family are there to support us. And we hopefully have the skills and the resources to do that work and to seek out other doors if we need it. But what if you've been burned in the past behind these doors, or your trauma has been re-triggered? And what if your hallway is full of chaos and poverty and substance use and abuse, and your supports are struggling just as much as you are? Those next 4 weeks to that appointment suddenly seem like an awfully long way away. Many of our clients realize the chaos of their hallways, and they've opened many doors, but they've also found many doors closed to them. Often they feel like it's a no-win situation. It often reminds me of going to my kids' hockey tournaments where my husband's loudly snoring in the hotel room and I can't sleep, but the hallway is full of hyperactive kids tearing up the hotel. So no place is really safe or quiet. The only option is to hide out, sometimes in the bathtub. And that's what I think some of our clients are doing. So what do we do? I think as service providers, we need to open our doors and to make sure that the experience that we are providing is as safe and as trauma informed as it can be. We need to go out into our clients' hallways with them and meet them in the midst of their chaos. We need to hold our clients' hands as they go through those doors, especially the scary ones. And we need to do a lot better job at bridging the time between appointments. So clients aren't stuck choosing between the monster in the hotel room, the hoodlums in the hallway, or hiding out in the bathroom. At the Community Health Center, we really strive to meet clients wherever they need us to be. And sometimes we've been in some pretty interesting spots, but families appreciate it all the more. Now, of course, you're saying I can't see my clients every day. And of course you can't. But there is somewhere that kids can be daily, and that place is school. School is the one place that kids can be away from the chaos, where they can develop relationships with caring adults, where they can be warm, fed, safe for a whole 6 hours. Where we could, if we chose to, we could set up daily check-ins for parents and engage parent outreach workers so that the small changes the parents need to do are easier and can be supported. And a place where community could rally, look out for each other's kids at pick up and drop off. These things we know work. So if I had my druthers, I'd sink most of our resources into schools and daycares. I'd put a social worker at every school, not a couple for each school board. And I'd encourage mentorship programs that link each student to teachers, hopefully for the long haul. And I'd hire principals like Mike Anderson, who's willing to do things like playing ball hockey at lunch because he knows that relationships are really where it's all at. And I'd move services such as healthcare closer to schools and places that are less threatening. And with parents' permission, I definitely would encourage that family physicians and mental health workers need to be more engaged with the school. And we need to embolden schools to reach out to the students' healthcare providers, especially for the students they worry about. We all know who those students are. They're the ones you lie awake at night thinking about. We have to be deliberate, and we've tried to do that at the CHC in connecting with our patients' schools. And I think it's allowed us to bridge connections. I also think we need to mandate, or at least put a greater stress on school attendance. One of the biggest indicators, in my mind, of substance use and instability at home is school non-attendance. And non-attendance is what ultimately continues the cycle of poverty and ACEs. We're failing some of our children, and some of these kids have no one but us to advocate for. I've walked kids to school for 2 straight weeks just to get them there, and they do it. And do they do it because they feel they have to? Maybe, but in the end, they do it. And they do it because I believe they want to. They just need the push and they need that extra support. And the conversations that we have along the way are so much more fruitful than the ones I have in my office. Many have spent their days just surviving and don't even have the time or haven't even considered a future for themselves. So they don't see school for the future it will provide their kids. We have to help them see that. I'm not saying it's easy. It takes a lot of willpower and patience to persist with challenging clients. My day is always easier when the tough ones don't show up. And I'm sure if you're a teacher, the days those challenging kids stay home, you breathe a little sigh of relief. but we have to persist. They expect us to give up, as everyone else has, and they'll push us away, oftentimes to protect themselves. But when we persist, they're often surprised and a bit cautious, but they slowly begin to trust and things can move forward. It's a slow road, but don't give up on them. It's like comparing your spirited child to your chill child. The intensity is greater and the battles may be bigger, but the joyful moments are also greater and the successes are even more rewarding. I leave you with one last thought. I have a client who is heading off to rehab yet again. I'm not sure what prompted me, maybe desperation, but I bought and gave her a card that said, "We believe in you and we're proud of you no matter what the outcome." And we signed it from our staff. And we gave this to her along with a rock that we'd written hope on with a Sharpie that we found at the office. She had never before cried in my office, but she cried the day I gave her that card. She said that no one believed in her, had ever believed in her before, given her anything that wasn't without condition. She didn't last that round of rehab, but she found her way back and was successful the second time. And she says she took that card and that rock with her. Years of therapy and medication and diagnoses and specialists, and perhaps it was a $5 card that made all the difference. So please look for the difference, be the difference, leave no child behind. We can do this if we do it together. Thank you. And now I'll pass it on to Mike Anderson.
Thanks, Dr. Bloom. That is a tough two different presenters to follow. I would like to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm currently the principal of the elementary remote school, which is in the Upper Grand. We have 4,200 students that are learning online. Previous to this position, I was at Brantaf for 4 years as the principal. And I would like to have everyone think back to what it means when something goes wrong at school and maybe you got sent to the office or you heard about someone getting sent to the office. One of the things that we worked hard at Brant, we worked really hard for the entire time I was there, is building a school culture that is based on caring relationships. So when students showed up at the office, usually they had done something, and the normal go-to is I've done something wrong, I've hurt someone, I've made a mistake, and I'm bad. And bad kids get sent to the office. So my go-to with kids is to make sure that they know that I am there to help them learn. A line I would often use with students that came to my office would be, "Hey, something's happened. I'm not sure why you're here yet. I'm going to find out, but I want you to know that I care about you. You're a good person, and I'm here to help you learn from your mistake. Everything's going to be okay." I don't yell at kids. There's no need to yell at a student, and that's something that I don't know if we state that enough. Kids need to know that they are surrounded by caring adults. So it sounds simple enough, but there are so many ways in the school system. There's some legacy issues and some systemic ways that we've operated that, when someone makes a mistake, they need to pay the price and they need to be disciplined. And I'm not the first person to say that approach of pushing kids back and being hard on them is a mistake. And I'm going to explain my perspective on this. So one of the things that we prioritized at Brant was the physical and emotional safety of our students, so that students know they're physically safe and they're emotionally safe. We also had a number of students that were exhibiting what I would call stress behavior. So a great example would be when I first got to the school, kids lining up outside, and they're all lined up and they're all, little grade twos that are all, butting in line and shoving, and they're waiting to go inside. And what I kept seeing early on was kids getting bumped from behind, interpreting that as someone shoved me on purpose, and turning around and shoving them back and escalating behavior. So one of the things, if we recognize that students, and a trauma-informed lens says, let's stop thinking of kids as being bad or being difficult, and look at it as we have kids that are struggling with with stress. What can we do to help change our environment? Instead of saying what's wrong with this student, saying what can we do in our environment to decrease the stress, to help our students have more success. So one of the first things we did is we just got rid of lining up at recess. It sounds super simple, and it is. When the bell rings, kids come into school. And some kids that are at the back of the yard take longer to get to the school than the kids that were playing, skipping right at the tarmac at the entrance to the door. That creates a natural staggered entry instead of a bottleneck. It eliminates students standing in line and shoving and getting in physical close proximity to each other that's causing that stress. So it was a simple thing, and we saw immediate returns on this. Our students had less stress entering the building. Transitioning, moving from one space to another in a school environment it's something that we have to teach kids how to do. And there's ways to do it so that our students know we need to travel safely. And we also need to make sure that as adults, this isn't just about follow the rules and walk in line. It's let's teach them what it means to be safe, how to be aware of their surroundings, and do our best not to bump into people. But if we do, acknowledge, hey, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Because if you get bumped and someone immediately says, hey, oops, that was an accident, it's way less likely to trigger a stress response and a retaliation. And most adults, and actually most kids figure that out, but we need to specifically help our students. So a bunch of the strategies that we used at our school were things that we taught the entire school, all the students. It really benefited our students that were dealing with trauma and dealing with stress behavior. Some of our students, we were seeing it every single day. So we put extra effort into helping them learn how to manage their stress. Another thing we realized was the teachers at Brant, we focused a lot on how can we teach students how to de-escalate when they're upset, when they're stressed out, and modeling slowing our breath down, modeling that everything's going to be okay, and showing calmness in ourselves is a huge way to go. It's a path that helps students see an adult who's showing them how to respond, that's calm and consistent and caring. This is why when a student is stressed and they're shoving someone, yelling at that student is the worst thing that we can do because it escalates everyone. So a bunch of the students in our school have had a very adverse response to people that try to exert power over them. They don't like that. And I don't actually think most humans like that. So instead of thinking of we are the adults and we're going to have power over our students, it's about building relationships. We build our relationships with our students, and we are teaching our students not just the subjects. So this is something that our staff embraced, and we did a bunch of work with how do we rethink student behavior? How do we think about what we're teaching our students through not just our words, but also our actions and how we're modeling for our students. One of the phrases and concepts that I brought into the school was the notion of being a warm demander. So there is something out there in research that talks about something called the pedagogy of poverty. And people who subscribe to the pedagogy of poverty would say things like, well, these kids are poor and they're probably they don't have a lot going for them and they're probably not going to go to university and we shouldn't stress them out and we shouldn't just really make it easy for them and lower the demands. And, maybe we're just doing coloring all day. Pedagogy of poverty is a mistake. It does not help students. It sends the message that we don't believe they can learn. And that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in contrast to that, we talked about what it meant to be a warm demander. And a warm demander is someone who has expectations, academic and behavioral expectations for kids, and is caring and supportive. A great example for a warm demander would be the student who says, I'm not doing my work today. And traditionally the teacher was like, well, you're going to get sent to the office, or I'm going to call your parents and you have to do the work. And they dig their heels in and they're like, no. And someone's like, you have to do your work, whatever. When I was a kid, that's people would yell. A warm demanders approach would be, hey, I see you're struggling here. What can we do to help you out? What do you need to get this work done? They're like, I don't want to do this. We're like, completely. Maybe you need a bit of time, because it's okay if right now you need a break. You don't have to do the work right now, but we care about you so much. We have to do our job and help you learn. So we can wait. We can do it after school if you want. We could do it tomorrow, but we need to get the work done. And if you're not able to do it right now, that's okay. No one's going to yell at you. We care about you as a human, as who you are. And we care about you so much that we're going to make sure you get your work done. I remember one time a student, I had this conversation, and a student was like, I'm not doing it. There's no way I'm doing it. I was like, okay, well, you let me know when you're ready. If you're feeling stressed, now's not the right time, let me know. And after school, I said, okay, if you want, we can do it after school. And they were like, I don't want to. And as soon as the bell rang, they bolted, ran out of the school and ran home. And I also know the student, and I have a relationship with the family. I called the family and said, hi, your child didn't get all their work done today, and I really want to work as a partner with you and the family. Would you be willing to bring the child back to school and we can get the work done? Not going to yell. No one's in trouble. We just need to get our learning done. And brought the student back. The student was not happy at first. And I said, remember, I'm not mad. I don't yell at kids. I care about you. And we need to make sure that you get your learning done. And the student, it was awesome because they could easily do the work. This only works if you're asking them to do work that's within their realm. If it's something that's way outside of their ability range, that stress is different. The student got the work done in like 7 minutes. And they said, you know what, next time I'm just going to do it in class, because this is just like, I had to do it anyway. And I was like, awesome. Yeah, that's right. We're going to do our learning. No shame, no anger, no like getting in trouble. That warm demander sends the message, I care about you. I believe you can do this work, and I'm going to support you. That's big. That is how we develop those relationships with our students, and how we help them learn that high expectations are important. The ACEs research out there will support this. We need to have high expectations for kids, because lowering our expectations sends the message that we don't believe in them. That's another example of some work that we've done in our school. I'm going to give you a few more specific examples that some of you might want to take back. One of them is the idea of noticing students' behavior instead of judging it. So when a student is struggling with something, for example, they are, a good example might be students that are not on task. So they're sitting in class and they're not getting their work done. They're not participating with their group. Instead of saying, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to and you need to get back on track, using which can create a defense mechanism of that seems like that's power over them. The relationship approach could say, when you notice something, hey, I noticed you're not getting your work done right now. Anything you can do to help you?
Mike, I'm just going to stop you there and just give you like a 45-second warning, if you don't mind just giving one more great example.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Oh, sorry. I got the text message to wrap up. Sorry, Rochelle. All right. So here's what I'm going to end with. I want people to think about student when there's behavior and when there's issues going on. Think of this through a lens. And I loved Dr. Clinton's analogy. It does take a village. All the adults around the child need to care about them as human beings, build a relationship, and it takes that village. And we want to surround them and encircle our students with a caring, supportive adults. And at this time, we are going to have a presentation from, sorry, one second, Katie Davis is going to be speaking, but first she is going to show a slideshow. Thank you.
Hey there, guys. I'm just going to get you to pause the video, and then we'll have Katie speak, and we'll work on the audio, if that's okay. So Katie, if you want to put your video on, and we'll hear from you first, and we'll watch the amazing parent outreach worker video in a moment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Davis, and I'm the Parent Outreach Worker in Guelph. I'm happy to be here with you today to tell you a little bit about this program and provide some examples of how it connects to the topic of adverse childhood experiences and resiliency. This program is an initiative of the Guelph Community Health Center and is supported by partner organizations in our community, including Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health, Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition, and Family and Children's Services. This program aligns with our collective efforts to prevent and address ACEs, ensure health equity, and enhance health promotion. I'm proud to be part of this innovative program since it began in 2012. The overall objective of the Parent Outreach Worker program is to provide early intervention and prevention to children and families whose problems may, if left without help, have irreversible impacts. We aim to increase protective factors and decrease risk factors for children whose families experiencing ongoing challenges or specific situational problems that, if left unaided, could pose risk of harm to children's well-being. I work in the Brant neighborhood. In total, there are 5 parent outreach workers that work in prioritized neighborhoods in our community. My role is to work with parents and caregivers with children from 0 to 18 years of age who have concerns or challenges in their family home. I listen, provide support, and advocate for families in many situations, including food insecurity, housing challenges, health issues, parenting and child behavior, mental health, and recreation for children. I assist families to problem solve and provide support with navigating systems and services that could alleviate any barriers that parents may face. In my opinion, many of the issues that families struggle with are directly related to their own ACEs. The parent outreach workers, along with our program partners, build networks around families, mini communities that contain both formal and informal supports. Also, part of our role is to help agencies improve the effectiveness and reach of their services to families that would often not access these supports on their own. One of the greatest benefits of the parent outreach worker role is having us based right in the neighborhood, which addresses a barrier that many parents face, and that's lack of transportation. The fact that most of our community members can walk to the neighborhood group makes it more likely that they will come to access programs and services there. Being in the neighborhood allows me to not only meet families in their own communities where they feel safe, comfortable, and have a sense of familiarity, but also allows me to become part of the community, which helps build trust and allows me to deepen my understanding of the needs, strengths, and challenges of the neighborhood. The neighborhood group provides a safe, comfortable space where parents can meet and access support, which becomes what we refer to as a bumping ground, where parents can also meet other parents. For example, when families are coming to the neighborhood group to pick up their monthly garden fresh box, it allows me to connect families and build those intentional relationships. The wide variety of programs such as food programs, backpacks, Christmas support, summer camps, tax clinics offered through the neighborhood group is another benefit of having my role there. I feel fortunate to be able to connect those families to the programs. To be able to work closely with the neighborhood support worker, Nikki, is such a benefit, knowing that any introductions and warm handoffs to them will be met with respect and care, and that's critical in getting families engaged in the neighborhood group. We are also able to curate opportunities with partners that work in the community members that we serve. For example, a women in crisis worker will often come to the neighborhood group and meet in the safe, confidential space. As we work together to create trust with families and build on strengths, we have found that many of these individuals have become some of our most valued volunteers and community leaders. This can have a direct benefit on the family functioning. There are many examples of this that I get to pay witness to. An example is when parents are supported and connected in the neighborhood, it trickles down to the kids. A mom signs her son up for a few weeks of summer camp one summer after hearing about it when she comes to get her school snacks. Her son attends and loves his summer camp counselor, and it's the highlight of his summer. His counselor was a role model and provided a huge positive influence in his life. He attends camp for the next 4 years until he is aged out and then goes on to attend the Leader in Training program for preteens. From the Leader in Training program, he now volunteers every summer at the camp until he becomes a paid camp counselor. It was all because of the one awesome camp leader who provided him with the confidence and support from his first summer of camp. One of the partnerships that assist with the effectiveness of reaching families that I would like to highlight is one with the Early On programs. The Guelph Community Health Center runs child and parent programs at the main site, which is at the Stone Road Mall. When it was identified that it was a barrier for families to get to these programs at the mall, we brought the Circle of Security, an evidence-based resilience program, to the neighborhood. When the COVID-19 pandemic started, we continued to want to provide support to these families in their own home. The Early On team then began building activity kits, and the parent outreach workers brought these kits to families' doorsteps. Parents and kids were super excited to have new activities in the home, and it alleviated isolation and stress that parents were feeling. The Parent Outreach program has flexibility to meet families where they're at and bring services right to those families in their homes. Another highlight of building mini communities around families is the connection to the other families. As service providers, we can only do so much in our capacity during our workday, but we all know that parenting is a tough job and parents need support all hours of the day. Supporting families to build social networks helps families build resiliency, support each other, and care for one another. The neighborhood group is a comfortable place for parents to be able to facilitate these relationships. Parents meet other parents when they are coming in to pick up their school snacks. Relationships blossom, and now they are helping each other out on evenings and weekends with things such as childcare. Between the community built around other parents with service providers and other parents, we are mitigating ACEs for children in the home and building capacity and connections. Next is Nikki. She is the neighborhood support worker at the Brant Neighborhood Group, and she's going to tell you a little about her personal and professional experience in the neighborhood.
Hello, as my wonderful coworker Katie said, this afternoon I'd like to share with you how positive peer intervention helped to alter my family's journey and shape my future. Several years ago, I found myself to be a single mother without any support. I was isolated, struggling with mental health, and the grip of depression was taking hold. My developmentally delayed child at the time had yet to be diagnosed, and I had no clue where to go or how to get her the help she truly needed. I felt lost, helpless, and hopeless as a parent. While walking my children to school one day, another mother and I began to chat about summer plans. Once again, I felt awful. I had to explain that we'd be spending most of our summer at home, as there just wasn't the option to do much else. She then told me about a great, affordable summer camp that was run by a local neighborhood group just down the road. I was so happy to have found something not only I could afford, but was right in my own backyard. I went in that very morning to try to find out more, and more I found. I was introduced to the neighborhood support worker, as well as the parent outreach worker at the Brant Avenue Neighborhood Group, who both sat me down and helped me get my children registered for summer camp. Over the next few weeks, I started sharing my struggles, and a plan was immediately put into place. I was connected with the community resources such as CMHA, GCHC, Kids Ability, as well as signed up for community parenting courses and social events. I went from being overwhelmed and feeling alone to having a complete network within weeks. Before long, my participating in groups turned into volunteering for many, and soon thereafter, I was hired as a Brant Programs assistant. I made friends, built my confidence, and became a stronger parent. My children were able to access services and opportunities, and as a family, we began to not just thrive, but grow. Now I'm the neighborhood support worker at the Brant Neighborhood Group. I have the privilege of working hand in hand with Katie to help support our community navigate and access social support systems, food security programs, partners and agencies, and most importantly, connect with each other. Every day, I'm humbled to be able to serve the community I've been working with, volunteering in, and growing with for the past 9 years. Working in my own neighborhood allows me to build trusting, strong, healthy relationships with the families and individuals I work with, as well as understand the diverse gifts, needs, and struggles that we as a community may be facing. In my years working with the neighborhood, I've seen the power of positive guidance and intervention and how families can benefit. I've seen many parents form strong, healthy relationships with their children with the coaching of positive parenting groups suggested by parent outreach workers. I've seen strong parents and community members form safety nets around at-risk families, helping to pull them out of darkness without the intervention of family and children's services. And personally, the trajectory my life has taken is a prime example of how a few caring individuals reaching out at the right time can change an entire family's outcome. I'll now turn the mic back to Rochelle, who will be guiding us through our question and answer segment.
Thank you so much, Nikki. One of the comments that we received in the chat is a really important one. And I think that, there's been some recent articles coming out of healthy debate. If you Googled healthy debate and ACEs, there's an excellent article that came out 2 weeks ago that really talked about the importance of being really thoughtful in our languaging around ACEs and ACEs screening and ACEs scores, because as Dr. Clinton says to us, ACEs are our biology, they're not our destiny. And there is really that opportunity to build resilience. The last thing that we want to engage in as service providers and helpers or neighbors is blaming or shaming for the impact that that toxic stress may have had within a household, but rather really extend a caring arm and to around families, and to also really inform people so that they can make a really informed decision. And so when we talk about that in primary care offices, or we talk about that in schools, or we talk about that in neighborhoods, we are really talking about building support and really leaning away from that conversation. And so a really great point in the chat about the need to build that protective resiliency from that space of support. So really important point, and thanks for raising that. We did have one question. I'm going to put that to Dr. Bloom on this very topic, which is how do you engage with families around the discussion around adverse childhood experiences, really recognizing that sensitivity that I just spoke about?
Yeah, so I guess, some people will say, do you universally screen? And in the States, some would argue that every patient in your practice should be screened. I think it is a sense, you're asking pretty strong questions there. And I think you have to be prepared to manage people's feelings when you bring that up. So do I screen everybody? Absolutely not. But do I have the ACEs screen in the back of my head with every single client I see? Absolutely. And so I do. It's all about relationship building. I prefer to have a relationship first with a client, and everybody's different in how I approach it. Some people, if I'm concerned about how they will receive the ACEs, I sometimes put it out as new research that says that if we do this screen, maybe it will help us to direct care or to help us kind of solve a clinical issue that we're struggling with. And for others, I teach about ACEs first, and we talk about resiliency first, because hope is the most important thing. And my patients are so incredibly bright and strong. And so sometimes if you present the ACEs first, they fail to see the resiliency that they have and all the skills that they already have. So I think it's really important that we talk about their skills and where they've come from and what they've done. And a lot of it is just shifting that conversation away from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. And that is really key, because most patients that have struggled, it's been about figuring out what the diagnosis is, as opposed to what their lives and their story's been to this point. So we really try and focus on that. So I hope that helps answer that question.
That's great, Dr. Bloom. And again, thank you to all of the panelists who shared today. That's great. And so if we could get the slides back up just to wrap up our presentation, really honoring people's time. We do have just some thanks to extend. And I would just encourage you all to think about the area of the stream that you are engaged in this protective work. And so when we really think about that, you might be upstream in prevention, you might be in the middle of the stream in treatment and intervention, or you may be downstream supporting overdose prevention efforts or suicide prevention. And what we know that each one of those areas is incredibly important to supporting a caring community. And in this time of the pandemic and beyond, it is incredibly important to be really mindful of just how grateful we are for that compassionate care that you're bringing to your communities. Just a reminder of the ACEs Coalition website, there is a set of tools there, toolkits that you can download. There's actually 5 of those to support you in implementing an ACEs informed approach in your practice. And then there is also the 5 module trainings that we introduced today. And we are working on CME accreditation for those trainings for any primary care providers who are on the call today. So Katrina, if you could just advance the slide to the final one. We seem to be actually frozen. And so now I'm just going to move us to our thank yous. So as we said, I want to thank Ontario Trillium Foundation and also acknowledge the local politicians who joined us today. Special thanks to Dr. Clinton. As always, you left us inspired and informed and equipped with tangible steps to take when engaging and supporting children and families. To those service providers who shared their local experiences, Dr. Bloom, Mike, Katie, and Nikki, I think all of us saw the care that you take for these families and children in your work, really streaming out through your presentations. And then to the members of the ACEs Coalition of Guelph and Wellington County who created this vision for today's session, especially the relentless leadership of Sarah Hanstra and Carolyn Folkman, so thank you. CMHA Waterloo-Wellington, who hosted the webinar and supported the technical approach, and then United Way Wellington Dufferin and the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction for your financial support. And finally, to each of you, thanks for your interest, your commitment to engaging in evidence-informed care and to bringing ACEs-informed practice to life in your communities. Thank you for joining us, and bye for now.